Hello, hello, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and it is the hard time of the season where decisions have to be made. The roster has to be molded together, and the Pittsburgh Penguins showed the brunt force object of that on Sunday afternoon, cutting 17 players. One other player is looking like he will be cut after tonight's preseason game, but we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about our bold predictions for the 2022-23 season. I've been ready for this. In particular, one of my predictions I've had loaded up since the end of June, ready to go for this episode. So I'm excited to actually talk to you about that because I haven't told you any of my bold predictions, Horwat, and neither have you told me any of yours. So this is going to be interesting to see where we go when it comes to this is our projection taken out past the umpteenth degree. Like these are very bold predictions. We're not going to come out and say Jake Gensel's going to score 40 goals. That's not bold. And if somebody says that's their bold prediction, turn their podcast off, turn their YouTube video off, because they're scared to get out there and put something out there that is a little bit ridiculous. But that's what we'll do, and then we'll end it with our Pens poll. But Horwat, we got to start here. The Penguins making roster cuts, trim the roster down to 28 players. 5 more cuts have to come before the start of the season for the Penguins to become compliant with the 23-man roster of the NHL. A lot of cuts on this list. What is one name that you saw that kind of surprised you a little bit?
On the cut list, I think the Valtteri Puustinen getting cut this late, it's shocking he made it that far, but at the same time, it's kind of shocking he got cut at all to start. I think the big one, though, for everyone is going to be the Drew O'Connor selection, the Drew O'Connor subtraction from the lineup, because sure, he may not have been fighting for a playoff spot, for a roster spot exactly. He was up there with guys that could be the 13th forward, maybe even the 12th guy in. So it's a little surprising to see O'Connor the one that gets that big axing. Everyone else, it at least makes sense. Alex Nylander, I think we were all thinking would fight a little more for it. But I think we all in the back of our heads knew his place was going to be in the AHL. Same with Kajula, and like I said, same with Puustinen, guys like Hollander, young guys. Legray may put up a fight, but again, he was a guy that we knew was going to be sent down, but maybe brought up faster than we thought before. As for the defenders, nothing surprising. As for the goalies, nothing surprising. So I would have to chalk it up to Drew O'Connor in that spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Just when I look at these cuts, there's a couple, and most of them made sense, okay? You had that game on Saturday, and yes, the Penguins lost again in the preseason, but you had that game on Saturday of mostly these players, basically stating that the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have one of the oldest teams in the National Hockey League when it comes to combined age, are not taking the preseason very seriously. Their big guns have played in one game. They're going to play in a second one later tonight. They'll probably play in the third one later this week, but they were not going to make their big guns, Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby, even Jake Gensel. They're not making them play. And I think the big thing about that is they play all of these inter-squad scrimmages, which are, and have been, at least from what I've seen, just as intense as a preseason game, which isn't saying much. But why worry about playing these guys against other teams who have players that are trying to make a name for themselves when you can control the entire environment and control both sides in the regular camp practices for the inter-squad scrimmages? So I really like that train of thought. I like that way of attacking it. But honestly, I think that when you look at this, the first thing you have to look at, and I tiered this a little bit, but the first thing you have to look at is tier number 4 for me, which is these are the junior players that stayed longer because they were injured. That's Owen Pickering, that's Nico Collins, and honestly, you expected them to go, and now that you saw them both practicing, it was only a matter of time, and this is what happens. They both get returned to juniors.
And that's just exactly what we were expecting. Also, it was Nolan Collins, but yeah, it's just what we were expecting.
Nico Collins is a wide receiver in the NFL. Jesus.
Yeah, I'd never heard that name before in my life, but yeah, Owen Pickering we knew was going back to juniors. We just wanted him up here to get the experience and to get in the reps and to begin growing that bond with the Penguins organization. Nolan Collins, same thing, I guess. I don't know much about him other than he was injured the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew some guys were definitely going back to juniors. The other two that were the first two cuts went back to juniors a while ago. So this was mostly run of the mill, I would say, for a set of roster cuts.
Yeah, we expected that to happen. Honestly, I thought Pickering hung on a little longer than I expected. But again, with the injuries, that's what's going to happen. Now, tier 3 is the tier with the most players. This is basically the probably not going to see them back in Pittsburgh this season tier. Most of them, I mean, maybe Dustin Tokarski. We've always seen how you need a third string goalie from time to time. So maybe Tokarski, maybe Philip Lindbergh. Those two goalies were the final two goalies sent down to create, obviously, DeSmith and Jari as your top two. But then the rest of this tier is Jamie Devane, Olsen, Nathan Legare, Ravis Ansons, Corey Andonovsky, Xavier Willette, Colin Sawyer, and Jack St. Ivany. Guys that, yes, they're good enough to make it past that first round of cuts. Yes, they're guys that the Penguins are going to keep their eyes on this season and want to see a lot of progression from. But also, they're guys that you really don't expect to see in the NHL level unless you have to really hit that emergency break glass if button.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, these are guys we're not going to see, we may not see for a long, long time. Maybe probably not until, next preseason, next camp?
For a lot of them, unless you watch Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins hockey, where you're going to see all of them. And honestly, this year, same thing I said last year. There's a lot of guys that you're going to want to watch in Wilkes-Barre. So if you can, and you want to see some good hockey, you're going to see guys like Legare, guys like, Jamie Devane was a monster in that fight against Ben Harper. Maybe a very entertaining guy to watch. He's a veteran. Same with Colin Sawyer, Jack St. Ivany, two college signings going to play their first little taste of professional hockey. So there's going to be plenty of storylines in Wilkes-Barre, and we're going to try to have a little bit better coverage of that this year than we did last.
They should be a fun team, actually, and a good team if everyone's taking the right strides. They should be entertaining because they have that decent amount of veteran presence down there with a guy like Taylor Fedun or the big guy you just mentioned whose name just escaped me.
Jamie Devane.
Oh, yeah. Tacking those two in with all these young guns who could have futures in the NHL in guys like Philip Hollander, Valtteri Puustinen, Nathan Legare, maybe Sam Poulin. We'll see how things go. Who knows with the P.O. Joseph situation? There's a lot of names that are going to be down there that are going to make that team very good and very entertaining. Hopefully just things continue to work out in the right direction for all of those players.
And they made the playoffs last year for the first time in a couple of seasons, if I'm not incorrect there. And they also won a playoff series. So they're already miles ahead of the Pittsburgh Penguins at the NHL level. But I digress on that. Tier number 2 are players that not surprising that they didn't make the opening day roster. They had an outside chance entering camp, but guys that we could see at some point later in the season. That's your Nylanders, your Valtteri Puustinens, your Philip Hollanders. These guys that when they came into camp, you said, you know what? If they come in and they perform really well and somebody else takes a step back, maybe they do earn a roster spot. But they're not guys that you're going to see, they're going to be the 13th forward, because the Penguins want to see them playing hockey, not sitting up in the press box. So those 3 guys get sent down as well. They're my tier number 2 of guys that we could see at some point.
Yeah, that's just about right. It's going to be a lot of break glass in case of emergency type guys, but some glass is breaking sooner than others. But these are guys that, if Hollander and Puustinen we've seen in the NHL before. Now it is a matter of getting more legs under you, then coming right back up whenever you're needed.
Yeah, maybe they can play more than one game this go around. But the tier 1, and you already mentioned one of those names, Drew O'Connor, who I really thought not only had earned an opportunity to be the 13th forward for the Pittsburgh Penguins out of camp, I thought he was fighting really hard against Ryan Poehling to be the 12th forward and be in that opening night lineup, not just the opening night roster. So it's a matter of the fact there that same thing. I guess they want to see him play more. I guess they want to see him not be that 13th forward, not be in the NHL level. He's probably somebody that'll be the first or second call up, though. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that he is at the very top of that list. But interesting that they did send him down. I was not expecting to see his name on the waiver wire. Not the waiver wire. He doesn't have to go through waivers. I wasn't expecting to see his name on the cut list. But again, it might be a victim of what's happening with the salary cap, and you got to send guys down that are two-way. So I don't know. I was very surprised to see him, and I was also surprised to see Drake Caggiula. I mean, this is tier number one, the tier that I entitled "Decisions Were Made Here Today," and Drake Caggiula is somebody that, especially in this past week, you've heard a lot of people talking about. He looks really good. The players love to see him. I think it was either Danny or somebody else that's that covers the Penguins on the beat said, just a reminder here. I think it was Danny Shirey of DK Pittsburgh Sports. He said, just a reminder, Drake Caggiula has never played an American Hockey League game. Well, it looks like that might be changing as he was sent down. So it was very interesting that both of those guys were sent down when they were.
What a note. I did not realize that.
Mm-hmm.
And now go figure, I can't find his name anywhere. Because he's good through waivers. That could be it. But oh, there he is. That's very interesting. I did not realize that either. I guess that really means he's so he's either been a healthy scratch or just in the lineup all the time, because he doesn't have too many games played under his belt per season. But
well, you have to think about where he came into the league at. He came in Edmonton, where they were.
Yeah, he played 60 and 67 in his first two seasons in Edmonton.
Yeah. They were desperate for forwards. They weren't going to let anybody sit in the minors and grow, because they needed guys that could make an impact now. So that's why Caggiula got to start right off the jump. And then at that point he was established, and he never really got sent down, but he did face injuries a couple times too.
Yeah. Yeah. Just very interesting. I did not realize that. And hey, you know what? Now's the time, I guess.
It's very interesting because, like I said, decisions were made here today on these two guys, both players, guys that, Sullivan had talked glowingly about.
Yep.
All the writers, consensus, when you talk to everybody, they're saying, yeah, these two guys are looking really good, especially this past week. Everything was about Drake Caggiula, it seemed. Like it might be preseason stories because, the big guys aren't really doing much. Like I said, they've only played in one preseason game. But really interesting that he ends up getting sent down. And then the other name on that list, somebody that's actually in the lineup tonight, but he is placed on waivers, is Radim Zohorna. Somebody else that I've been having glowing reviews about. And also 4 other players that we already mentioned, Tokarski, Ouellet, Nylander, and Caggiula all do have to pass through waivers in order to get down to Wilkes-Barre Scranton camp. But we expect that all 5 of those players will get there. It's just a matter of, I believe Zohorna is going to play in this game tonight and then probably get sent down.
Yeah, the Zohorna one, if he's not scooped up. I know this early in the season, waiver wire pickups are not usually made.
Yeah, not very often.
I feel like if a team really wanted some good depth to their forward core, though, people should be taking a flyer out on Radim Zohorna, but
there's a lot of those guys around the league right now, though, that are getting placed on waivers. Guys that, they're fringe NHLers. If they get an opportunity in the right spot, they could really make a name for themselves. But it's a matter of, there are so many of those guys right now. Like, who do you choose from? And there's almost like an unspoken rule, too, around the NHL where GMs, you don't see a lot of waiver wire pickups just because it's hard to cut some of these guys. It's hard to pick out that opening night roster. And a lot of these guys are making those decisions themselves. So to be able to go out and pick somebody else's up is a different thing.
Right. But you also have to figure there were so many other guys sent through the waiver wire. Like the Cap Friendly's tweet thread of it was five tweets long.
Yeah.
So there's plenty. And Greg McKegg was on there. If anyone's going to be taken, it's Craig McKegg. So yeah, like there's plenty of names out there for people to snag, but overall, I think he's going to clear through, and it's a little surprising that he most likely will eventually be sent to the minors, because he's been talked about so highly this camp. He's got an extra step of speed. He's added some puck skill. I know he started last year, but he's playing a lot more center to have him be a little more versatile.
Mm-hmm.
It was an interesting one, especially the timing of it, because again, you still have that game to play tonight, and he has to go through waivers. Sure, he didn't get cut from the squad. Maybe that's the little disguise of it, maybe trying to be a little sneaky, like, hey, see, he didn't get cut. He's still on our lineup. See, he's not on waivers. Ignore that fake tweet you're saying. I don't know. It could be anything, but it's very interesting that he might end up in the AHL to start the season anyway, especially with the pretty positive camp he's been having.
And when you think about it, all these names we said, it kind of lends to the fact that the Penguins have basically just announced who their 13th forward is to start the season, who's won that battle. And it's somebody that nobody was really talking about throughout all of training camp. So if you look at the roster, they have 5 more cuts coming because they currently sit at 28. Zohorna is going to get cut, which means they're going to be at 27. They're going to need to cut 4 more players. They currently have 16 forwards, 10 defensemen, 2 goaltenders. It breaks down to bubbles. Who's on the bubble for each one? Forwards, you have Ryan Poehling on the bubble, Josh Archibald, who we'll talk about, Jonathan Gruden, and Sam Poulin. So, okay, Gruden and Poulin, they're gone. They're going to end up in the minors to start the season. There's no way that Sam Poulin starts the season at the NHL level. If he does, I'll bite my tongue. I'll come onto this podcast. I'll call myself an idiot, whatever. He's not starting the season at the NHL level. I don't see that happening. And then the defense bubble, which is, you could have a top 6 out of the defense bubble with P.O. Joseph, Ty Smith, Mark Friedman, Chad Ruhwedel, and Taylor Fedun. So there's one name on that list that is going. So out of the 4 names you need to be compliant with the NHL roster, you got 3 that are already going to definitely be cut. So that means one person has to be cut. Probably not going to be a forward because you're not going to go down to 12 forwards. Oh. And that means you have to make a decision on defense. And that's probably either P.O. Joseph or Ty Smith. It seems like Ty Smith has the advantage, as we've talked about before. But I want to talk about Josh Archibald because basically they just announced that he will be on the opening night roster, and he is who they chose as their 13th forward.
Whenever we acquired him, Ron Hextall pretty much said he's going to be in the lineup. Let's just be real. Hextall showed his hand right away with the Josh Archibald thing, which is still very confusing considering other players that could step in. But to be fair, I feel like as much as we may not have expected it or know that there are better players out there, we're going to have to give the guy a chance, I think, because he's in this position where he's going to be on the ice for us. He played 8 games last season for an assist. Love it. But he's a veteran player. He's been around for a while. Hell, he won a cup with us before. Why not? We're going to have to accept that he's going to be in this lineup. He's going to be on the 4th line. There's no, I would assume. I don't think they're going to put him on the 3rd. So he's going to be on that 4th line, maybe even that healthy scratch out. But unless he is just part of the last late cuts and we're not expecting it and not seeing it coming, we're just going to have to support him and be good fans about this and good, just be good fans about it and hope he does better than what we are all expecting him to do. He's obviously the coaching staff is seeing something we're not, right?
Either that or the fact is they could go with 12 forwards. It's not really something that you should really do. You should at least have one extra guy up there, that 13th forward. But they could realistically, because of the status of their defense core, they could realistically, keep those couple of guys up and only send one guy down like P.O. Joseph because he doesn't have to clear waivers and keep both Friedman and Ruhwedel, because we have seen, in a pinch, the Penguins will play a defenseman on that 4th line wing. And Mark Friedman is a guy that a lot of people have mentioned, hey, you could do worse for a 4th line guy in a pinch. But honestly, unless that's what they're doing, Josh Archibald is the guy. And Danny Shirey, again, second mention on the show, he said, listen, when I asked about Johan Larsson on the opening day of free agency, Ron Hextall scoffed at him and said, hey, I don't know about Johan Larsson, but I got, Josh Archibald. Danny said this on the latest podcast on Fifth Avenue as well, as where I heard this from. But yeah, not only that, but it reminded me, they signed him on the opening day of free agency to a $900,000 contract. So there were hints that this is the way that they were going, but just all over training camp, you heard about Kajula, you heard about Zohorna, you heard about O'Connor. And part of that might be because nobody really wanted to talk about Josh Archibald because he's a guy that we had early on in his career. He really got in the news for the wrong reasons, not for on-ice reasons last year. He didn't play a lot of games. And and people fell in love with the idea that somebody else would get that lineup spot, but he's been there all along, and that's what he earned. So unless, like I said, they go with that eight or nine defense core to start the season, probably it would be 8 defense core to start the season. I don't understand. I think Josh Archibald is going to be I don't understand, but I think Josh Archibald is going to be that 13th forward, which is something that we might have just been trying to avoid in our minds, but it's right there in front of us, and it's pretty blatantly obvious that that's who's going to earn that spot.
It's a lot of money. It's not league min. Ryan Poehling's still on league min at 7.5. That's a big part of it. You have to figure when you look at that $900,000 price tag, you look at some of the guys that are underneath that in Chad Ruhwedel, Mark Friedman. I already mentioned Ryan Poehling. Ty Smith's making less than that. I'm sure it's a rookie contract deal, but still, you understand that that's a higher regard than a couple other players if you look at it in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And, sure, you're not supposed to always look at it in that sense, but it is a factor to put into this. And for what it's worth, we are now just one cut away from being under the cap ceiling, but at the same time, that would give us an extra space on the roster. So it's an interesting little spot. We're still in that interesting little, hey, the roster size is this with this much money. Now we have to figure it out.
Yeah, there has to be a move made somewhere, though, because there's no way that the Penguins can freely make moves, especially, throughout the season, if they do not make a move to create some space. So you have to think something is going to happen. It's just a matter of when and if they can get a deal together, because we've said so many times it takes 2 to tango in the National Hockey League. And right now it doesn't seem like anybody is doing a dance with Ron Hextall. But we're going to take a quick break. When we return, bold predictions for the 2022-23 season. We'll see which of us has the most ridiculous predictions based in reality, of course. And we'll see which of these that will take the other ones on. But we'll be right back on the tip of the iceberg. Welcome back to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. Brlansky here with Horwat. We got bold predictions for the 2022-23 season. We each have 3 on deck. So Horwat, you know what? I'll let you lead.
Cool. I have 3 predictions of 3 varying tiers, I guess, if you will.
Okay, give me the first tier.
The first 2?
No, the first tier.
Oh, the first tier? Yeah, I'm trying to decide it here. I think this one might be a little lackadaisical almost, but it's something. I think Legare and Poulin both make NHL debuts this year. It is their time to finally do that, and I'm picking those 2 specifically because we've been talking about them for years and years now, it seems. They've been in this organization for a long time. They've both gone through highs and lows, and I think they're both currently on highs. I'm not saying that they're at their peaks, but they're both on their upward trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, as we talked very highly of Legare a couple weeks ago, and as Poulin is still coasting around on this training camp roster, I think they both have great chances of making their NHL debut at some point. I don't know if they'll make it and stay, or if it'll just be a situation like everyone last year where they're going to come up for a handful of games or just one game, get the taste, and be sent back down. But I think this is where we finally start to see their era in the Penguins uniforms and real Penguin uniforms.
I agree with you on Sam Poulin. I do think, and I think you can tell by how long he's held on at training camp, the fact that he will be in the lineup tonight for the 5th of 6 preseason games. And I think the way that you've seen him compete in camp, there's no doubt in my mind that at some point this season, as long as he keeps on the trajectory that he's on, that we'll see Sam Poulin. Mm-hmm. I'm a little bullish on whether or not Nate Legare is gonna make it,
and that's what makes this one a little bold.
I know. I know. I like it. I like the prediction. I'm intrigued to see what Legare does at the beginning of the season down in Wilkes-Barre. I'm intrigued to see if he can get the numbers that he was able to produce early in his career in juniors. If he's able to fill the back of the net the way that the Pittsburgh Penguins drafted him to do. So I don't know. That's what makes it bold. I like it though, because You saw last year, Valtteri Puustinen made that step, played one game. Philip Hollander made that step, played one game. Kasper Bjorkqvist, who's no longer with the Penguins organization, he made that step, played in 6 games. So there were a lot of guys that got cups of coffee, maybe even just a sip of coffee before getting sent down. But I've always said this season that I expect them to use their youth a little bit more, and that might be part of it. So I like that prediction, Horwat. But I'm going to lead off with my first one, and this one, let me know if it's too spicy for you. Kasperi Kapanen, clearly in the news for the wrong reasons last year. Not a great player last season. Only scored a handful of goals, and that'd be 11, with 3 of them coming in one game. Kasperi Kapanen will score 25 goals this season. 25 goals, which would be a career high for him. He had 11 goals in 79 games last year. His shooting percentage was 8.5%, which is putrid. It is to the level where not only is that you playing bad, but you don't have puck luck. And something's going to change. Clearly, he's looked good in training camp. I don't take any of that into account because he looked great in training camp last year. But I think he will work his way back into the Penguins' top 6 eventually, either by injury to somebody ahead of him or the fact that he plays well on that third line. And I also think he's going to score multiple shorthanded goals this season. It is underrated how fast he is. And on the penalty kill, where there's a little bit more space, and when the other team is playing a little bit more lackadaisical to their own zone, I think Kasperi Kapanen takes advantage and he scores multiple shorties this year.
He's done that twice so far in his career. He's gotten 2 shorthanded goals 2 years in a row, his last 2 in Toronto. I really like that idea for sure, the shorthanded goals part, because he and Blueger sharing that, especially if they share a line on the penalty kill, can be pretty offensively minded. I mean, we know Blueger has that little touch.
Blueger led the Penguins in shorthanded points last year. 1 goal, 1 assist.
That's all we had. Oh, goodness.
Yes. Yeah.
But I just remember the bubble year where he popped off for some reason. But yeah, I like that one a lot more than I like the 25 goals. 25 would be an impressive career high, a hell of a bounce back. That one's going to be interesting. I think he might get around 15.
Hey.
Not to like salt on the wound for Kasperi Kapanen, but he's got to really prove himself. And 25 would really, really prove himself.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be happy with 15 to 20. I think 25 is a bit much, but hey, you know what?
That's why they call it a bold prediction.
Well, yeah, all goes well.
All right, Horwat, what is your number 2?
This one's also a little interesting. It is back to it's a point prediction, if you will. But I think despite their age, this is going to come with 2 players. One of them is going to make a little more sense. Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin both touching 90 points, if not surpassing. Now, this is a little different. We already heard Tyler Kennedy say he wouldn't be shocked if Malkin led the team in points. I don't see that one happening. That's a little extreme. But Malkin, we can agree, is hungry this year. We know Sid might just do this in his sleep. It's 90 points. He had 84 last year, and sure, he's kind of regressing in point production a little bit. I'm trying to.
He also only played in 69 games, I believe.
Yes, he did, and then 55 the season before for 62. In the 40 whatever game season, he played 41 for 47, and then when you go back to his 79 game season in 18-19, 100 points. But he hasn't touched 90 before then since before our cup runs. So I think if he's able, I think he's going to have that trajectory to hit 90 again. As for Malkin, that's the questionable one, right? Of who's got 90 points in them. Malkin hasn't hit 90 points since 17-18. Now, again, fighting injuries, but new contract. He's hungry. He's been watching everything people have been saying. I think he's got a good chance at it this year. And we know scoring is up. And 90 points is hard to hit, but it is very well possible. He's also only done it 3 times. How about a 4th?
Yeah. Here's the thing, Horwat, and I promise to our listeners, we did not talk about these beforehand. So we didn't know what the other person was going to say. But I'll do you one better. The Penguins will have 2 100-point scorers, and you just mentioned their names. Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Crosby's last 100-point season, you mentioned in 2018-19 with 100 points. Evgeny Malkin, the last time he reached 100 points, the 2011 2012 season where he had 109. The last season that he played over 70 games, he had 98 points, which was 2017-18, which was, I get it, it was 5 years ago. But something about his season coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Call me somebody who gets attached to the narrative. Something about his season being healthy all offseason, having the reassurance that he will be a Pittsburgh Penguin for life. Something about it says to me that Evgeny Malkin is about to go off. Now, 100 points is a lot.
100 points is a lot.
100 points is a stretch. And that's what I said. These are bold predictions. These aren't rinky dink. Yeah, I'm going to try to make the right prediction. Because not all of these, probably most of these, won't come true.
Yeah.
But they're bold predictions. And I think if the Penguins have 2 100-point scorers, it's their 2 centers. Crosby, I think I agree with you, is not out of the realm of possibility. That one is a little bit more realistic. Evgeny Malkin, if he can stay healthy, though, the IM comeback tour part 2. He's like Elton John coming back
part 3
80 times. Yeah, he's Elton John with the comeback tours. But I think this time it comes around and it shows people that, hey, that's why this guy was supposed to be an NHL top 100 player. That's why this guy is a first ballot Hall of Fame player. And that's why the Pittsburgh Penguins have 2 100-point scorers, one being Sidney Crosby, one being Evgeny Malkin.
I thought I was being generous with 90.
Will you join me at 100, Horwat, or do you think that's too much?
No, because I thought about 100, and then I slipped Jake Gensel into that conversation for some reason, and then I thought, now we're just getting ridiculous.
Well, here's the thing: if these 2 Penguins are gonna reach 100 points, the power play needs to be better.
Yeah, that's true too. That's
both things. Both things. Gensel's gonna have to reach 90 or somewhere up there, and the Penguins' power play is gonna have to be top 10 in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just kind of kept Gensel off my predictions in general because we are already thinking of him at least hitting 40, possibly hitting 50. Neither of those are bold.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about him probably hitting 50 all year just because. Mm-hmm. So as for the 100 points, could be a little more bold for Gensel, but because when you said 2, I knew you were going to have Sid on there. I was thinking you were going to say Gensel.
That's the point.
And now here we are with him.
A little bit of suspense, Horwat. But hit me with your last one. We got one more each. Hit me with your last bold prediction for the Penguins in 2022-23.
My last one is quite fun, and it does include someone else who just signed a new contract this year. I will bold predict that Chris Letang, yet again for the second year in a row, has another career year. I don't know how he does it. I mean, hell, we don't know how he did it last year at the age of 34.
Mm-hmm.
Going off and putting up 68 points for a career high. Now, the career year could come in many different forms. Of course, it would have to equal at least 69 to 70 points. It could come in any way it wants. Maybe he scores more than 10 goals and gets fewer assists. But one way or the other, also bet his penalty minutes goes down from 49.
Mm-hmm.
I bet he has one more career year, and I'm averaging about 24, 25 minutes a game as he did last year. I'm not going to say Norris conversation stuff just because that ship has sailed despite how good he might be. Everyone's going to look at Adam Fox, Cale Makar, and the young guns these days.
Mm-hmm.
But Chris Letang in the Pittsburgh Penguins uniform, for the last time, will have his mountaintop year.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I really do it. I looked at Letang, and here's the thing. 68 points last year was very impressive, and we didn't know how he did it. One surefire way for him to get that career year part 2 would be the fact that he would have an actual defense partner. We don't know if Brian Dumoulin is that at this point of his career. But the one thing that will help him, though, I think, is Jeff Petrie. And I think is the way that Jeff Petrie and Marcus Pettersson are going to look as the Penguins' second D pairing. It might take a little bit off the shoulders of Chris Letang defensively, which will let him freewheel and score those points, which that's the thing about his season last year. He didn't just score 10 goals, 58 assists, and 68 points for a career high. He was very good defensively, defensively responsible, great on the penalty kill. One of the best reasons why that penalty kill was so good. He was fantastic on the power play, despite the power play not being great. He was good in all areas of the game last year. And he, like you said, those penalty minutes, was it 49 penalty minutes? Mm-hmm. That's not too bad for a guy that plays 25 minutes a game. So it's a matter of, he didn't take the stupid penalties last year. It wasn't the aggravated, I'm going to slash somebody because I'm pissed off and I'm French Canadian. It wasn't that. It wasn't Xavier Laflamme going out there and taking people's heads off. So I agree with you that he is in a really good position this year because his conditioning, it seems, never falters. We watched a conditioning stint for the Penguins when we were both there, and everybody else was down on a knee. These 22-year-olds down on a knee, and the 35-year-old sitting there like, can we go another one, please? And that is something that Chris Letang will always have, it seems. It seems like his conditioning level and his fitness level is, there's professional athletes and there's Chris Letang. So I agree that there's a chance that he does that. 70 points for a defenseman is a lot. As I say that, I remember the fact that, Roman Josi had 96 points last year, but, Chris Letang in the way that he plays and the role that he is in this offense, if he can get to 70, that would do a lot because he finished, 7th in Norris Trophy voting last year. So I believe he would finish top 10 again. I think that much is a given. Whether or not he gets into that top 3 is a different discussion. Probably not something that it's going to happen.
Now, the top, there's 3 spots for nominations. 2 of them are solidified with Makar and Fox's name for the next 5 seasons.
And then Hedman and Josi are probably fighting for the 3rd one.
Just filtering in and out. One thing that is interesting, though, whenever I say career year, like I said, it might come with fewer points, but maybe he steps his defensive game up to another level. Maybe he coasts at 60, fewer points, because we are talking about a defenseman here.
Yes.
But I don't know how, maybe his defensive metrics skyrocket for some reason,
Yeah.
Maybe there's a different angle to the career year that, the analytics more than I do, that I don't understand. So you'll have to inform me if that's how it works out. But
75% expected goals rate,
something like that. That's what that is. Yes,
it's part of it.
Yeah. So let's say that happens. Like that would be a huge part of it. But also, again, let's say this power play kicks off the way it's supposed to. Sid Gino could easily hit 100, and Chris Letang could easily crush 70.
The word "easily" is transposed in that conversation a little too easily for you.
Yes.
I don't, even if the power play is top 1, easily to 100 points for a forward and easily to 70 points for a defenseman is still a lot. But I can see that there's a path there. It creates a path for those guys.
Put it this way. Chris Letang had 22 points on the power play last season.
Yeah.
If he gets more than that, we're already in good shape. Because that was 20 assists. That's most of them, I feel like.
Yeah, which also shows me again that Chris Letang needs to shoot more on the Penguins power play. But the final bold prediction, we're going to round this out with number 6, or I guess number 5, because we both kind of shared the one unbeknownst to each other before the show. My final bold prediction is about the man in the big pads, the man in black, if you will. Tristan Jarry will finish the season as a finalist for the Vezina Trophy.
See, I was considering that one as well.
I think there's a path. I think there's a path for that, and I think that is the most realistic of all of the bold predictions that I have heard here today. I do, and that's a big statement because that means he's top 3 in goaltenders. Last year, he finished 7th in the National Hockey League in save percentage at a .919. He finished 8th in wins at 34 wins. I think he finishes top 5 in both of those categories. I think his shutout numbers increase a little bit more. And I think his backup goaltender is not going to hang him out to dry like Casey DeSmith hung him out to dry at the beginning of last season. I think DeSmith, I don't know what happened to him last year, but he was not good at the beginning of the season. I think he enters the season on a much better note than he did last year. And Tristan Jarry doesn't have to carry that workload, which leads to him being more consistently the guy we saw at the top level. The guy we saw against the New York Rangers in that first matchup on a matinee on a Saturday. The guy that shut down one of the best offenses in the National Hockey League. That's the guy that I think we see much more often this year. And that's why I have Tristan Jarry as a Vezina Trophy finalist. Not that he would win, but I think he's a finalist. I also think there's a reason because Shesterkin was so ungodly good last year. He's going to find some regression. There's no way he's going to hit that second year in a row. And Andrei Vasilevsky's always there. So I can't put him in the top 2, even if it's a bold prediction. But I do think he finishes in that top 3.
That's fair. So I'll help you out with this one because I'm going to kind of agree with you. Who are the what's one goalie we're both shocked is in early predictions for being the top goalie in the league?
Who's the guy that I'm shocked that's there?
We're both shocked. We've been but they'll have him in Hall of Fame discussions by the All-Star break. it seems. For Vancouver, Thatcher Demko.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Thatcher Demko's always there. I was like, Ilya Sorokin, but he's still really good.
And I'm not saying Thatcher Demko is bad. I'm saying he's getting overhyped to hell and back.
Mm-hmm.
Last season, both Thatcher Demko and Tristan Jarry ended with one Vezina vote for third place. When, if you look at the numbers, Tristan Jarry had a better season in every statistical category.
Mm-hmm.
So, if the trajectories remain the same here, let's say Thatcher Demko is supposed to be as good as people are saying. Now, if that means Tristan Jarry is the better, then yeah, absolutely, he's going to be in that top 3. There you go. Backed up your statement.
There we go. But those are our bold predictions. A lot of interesting takes in the past 20 minutes. But we're going to take one quick break, and then we'll come back and finish it off with a quick look at our weekly Pens poll. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. We are 10 days away, Horwat. 10 days. Drew O'Connor days. Oh, poor guy. He's not going to be there. Drew O'Connor days away from the start of the National Hockey League season for the Pittsburgh Penguins, I should say, because we are 8 days away from the actual start of the season on Tuesday, but the Penguins will not play until Thursday of next week. But with that, there's a couple of players that the Penguins acquired for a first-round pick, one being 2 seasons ago, one being 3 seasons ago, and they really haven't lived up to the hype, and that is Jason Zucker and Kasperi Kapanen. Injuries for Zucker, Kasperi Kapanen, whatever happened last season, somebody had a voodoo doll of them or whatever it was, did not go well. Either way, neither of them have met expectations, especially whenever they've been acquired for a first-round pick. So the question we asked this week was, will those 2 players, Zucker and Kapanen, combine for over or under 40 goals this season? Keep in mind, last year they combined for 19. So, Horwat, are you over or under the 40-goal mark for these 2 guys?
I might have to have a push and just say they combined for 40. No.
Okay, don't give me that.
I'm not, because I am going to go with over, because I'm going to step on your side a little bit with the generosity toward Kasperi Kapanen like we had discussed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But more or less, I think Jason Zucker really refines what we brought him here to do. If he's able to remain healthy and play with the same sort of tenacity and jump that he wanted to play with last season, I think he could carry most of those 40 for these 2. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'll jump on your side a little bit with Kapanen, and maybe he does hit 20, and there's half. All Zucker has to do now is pretty much be his average self, and he'll hit 20. Because we know he can do that. So I'm going to roll with the over, despite it possibly being a push.
Yeah, when I look at these guys, I do see 40 goals. I do see a path to 40 goals for these guys combined. Obviously, if I have Kapanen at 25, that means Zucker only has to hit 15. And then the question becomes, if Jason Zucker is healthy, he will hit 15 goals. Like that's what's going to happen. He's going to at least hit 15 goals. But, I mean, you look at what they did last season. Kapanen with 11, and that was the bottom of the barrel. That is the worst that it can get. So, yes, I think it's pretty clear and obvious that he's going to score at least 18. I think 18 is a fair bet to say that that's a lock for Kasperi Kapanen, as much of a lock as anything can be. So I think Kapanen does get to that 25, which I said earlier. And I also think that Jason Zucker will remain healthy, which to me means he needs to score at least 15 goals. I see that path, but I also understand why, a lot of people said under, and that this stems from our Pens poll.
Yeah.
56% of voters said that these 2 would combine for under 40 goals. 44% are along with us saying over. So I'll play devil's advocate here for the under. They scored 19.
Yeah.
So to say that they would together have to double what they did last season is a jump. It really is, especially when neither of them have hit 20 goals in a Penguins uniform. However, I do think Kasperi Kapanen's usage in the correct way. I mean, Mike Sullivan said earlier this camp, I have to do a better job at coaching him. Mm-hmm. So I believe that being used in the right way, being reassured with that new contract, I think that leads to Kasperi Kapanen having a better season. And Jason Zucker, I mean, knock on wood, is there any way that he can stay healthy for a full season? Because if he can, then it's good, but he hasn't done it. Again, same thing with what people say with Evgeny Malkin. Can he play a full season healthy? I don't know. Like, devil's advocate, he's not going to. Like, that's what he has shown you since he's come to the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's not going to stay healthy because of the way he plays and the age he is. That's the devil's advocate view. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can see why 56% of voters said under 40 goals.
And I can totally see why, too. I mean, the city of Pittsburgh is just down on their sports teams right now.
In general, yeah.
The Buccos are about to hit 100 losses again. We've seen what the Steelers are doing. Yeah, the Kenny Pickett era has started, but still just a depressing loss.
Oh, yeah.
To the Jets, and we're now 1-3, right?
Yeah, the Steelers season is over. We don't need to get into that because look at their next 4 games, and that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah. So Pittsburgh fans in general, just fans of the professional teams. Hey, let's lob Pitt in there. They also just took a depressing loss. Pitt football and Pitt basketball needs no introduction. We are down on our sports teams right now. That includes the Penguins because of those early playoff exits we've had for the past how many seasons.
Mm-hmm.
We are down bad on guys like Jason Zucker because, he's been injured the entire time. He hasn't lived up to the expectations yet. Kasperi Kapanen just had an awful season, and then we re-signed him to a bloated deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see where sports fans in this town get this idea that they're not going to do it. We're all kind of in the dark side right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it. I totally see both sides of this argument of, well, you want to see them do better, but at the same time, nothing is looking good in the City of Champions right now. So I can see both sides of it as well, just much like your devil's advocate, but mine from a more mental standpoint.
Yeah, and now here's the thing, and this will be the last thing we discuss on this show. How much of it do you think it's because of what they were acquired for? Now, stick with me on this one. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but I think Penguins fans were pretty spoiled in the early stages of the Crosby career, even into the middle towards the late stages of the Crosby career, is when the Penguins traded a first-round pick. The first time they really did it of note was Marian Hossa and Pascal Dupuis. Like, you can't get much better than that. Hossa was great for that playoff run. Dupuis was great his entire career in Pittsburgh. Like, he was fantastic until he couldn't play anymore. Then a couple years later, it's Jarome Iginla. And while, yes, the Penguins didn't, win with Jarome Iginla, they looked horrible in that conference finals. They went to the conference finals. And Iginla, while he didn't have a massive part in it, was that guy that the Penguins acquired, and then they went on a deep playoff run. Phil Kessel. They get Phil Kessel. Immediately, they win 2 Stanley Cups. Okay, that first-round pick definitely paid for itself there. And then it's Jason Zucker. They don't do anything. They don't win a playoff series. Now he misses 2 seasons basically due to injury. Then they get Kasperi Kapanen. They pay a first-round pick for a guy that they already traded away who was a first-round pick. He comes in, doesn't start the beginning of his first season in Pittsburgh because of visa issues, does pretty well in 40 games, and then has one of the worst seasons we have seen him have in his career. Do you think that it's expounded by the fact that previously when the Penguins spent a first-round pick at the trade deadline, it has worked out so well that now they just expected it to work again with guys like Zucker and Kapanen?
It's very interesting. I think Kapanen almost gets half of a pass because he was involved in the original Phil Kessel deal. So you kind of understand that, hey, we shipped him out along with the first-round pick to bring in Phil Kessel, who brought 2 cups. And then we brought him back. If you look at the rest of the deal for bringing Kapanen back, yeah, we sent out a first-round pick, but we also sent out Evan Rodriguez and Philip Hollander, both of which we got back.
Yeah, the pipeline between Pittsburgh and Toronto is an interesting history.
So there's not too much to be had there with the Kapanen deals. Like, for sure, yeah, it's hard losing the first-round pick. They ended up taking Rodion Amirov, by the way. But I don't know how deep Pens fans look into the first-round pick itself, part of it. I mean, in the Zucker one, it made total sense to make that trade. We acquired Jason Zucker for dropping a very not good Alex Galchenyuk Sure, we also dropped Kalen Addison, and that one hurts a little. But now our defense pipeline is stacked, sort of. Whenever I say stacked, I mean it's a pipeline. It is.
They have 9 NHL ready defensemen.
It is a logjam. That is the word I meant to say. Not
okay.
It is a logjam that is stacked. It is piling up. It's not phenomenal, but there's a ton of people there.
Mm-hmm.
And then that first round pick, who they chose, Carson Lambos, or it was they kept it. So. Yeah, I don't think people look too deeply into the picks of it because, I mean, hell, our drafts have been bad recently. Let's also just tell it like it is. When's the last time we had a draft pick play for us?
Mm-hmm.
It's been
Valtteri Puustinen last year.
Or at least like the most recent one. So I don't know how deeply we look into the draft pick part of it. We just want to see what these guys can do now. And you're right. Maybe that is also part of it. These guys have been disappointing so far.
Yeah, I think you don't look into it, but I think when you look at the general consensus of the Pittsburgh Penguins fan base, they look into it. And they don't look into who was picked in the first round. They don't care about that. It's the first round pick has been overvalued by Pittsburgh Penguins fans for a long time. And here's the thing. The first time you used it, I already went through the history. Hall of Famer, Phil Kessel, who's an enigma, Zucker and Kapanen, neither of which are on a Hall of Fame trajectory, neither of which are expected to ever get on a Hall of Fame trajectory. It's just a matter of you have to just not include those things. Like you have to separate each move as it is and what the market is at that point too, because sometimes that's the best available player on the market and you have to spend that first round pick in order to get it, or you just don't make a move. And we knew Jim Rutherford, who pulled the trigger on both of these trades, was not going to not make a move. So it's an interesting thing to talk about. We could probably talk about it for ages, but that's going to do it for this episode. We both say over 40 goals combined for Jason Zucker and Kasperi Kapanen. Just tack that onto our bold predictions that we talked about at the middle of the show. But we will see you guys on Thursday. Have a great week, Pens fans.